Open University.
Hello Lieblings, it's your lecturer here in Berlin in temporary Airbnb accommodation, and I just thought I would update you with some anecdotes about the last few days. I left Britain on Thursday, flew with EasyJet from Gatwick, and Gatwick is a kind of hellhole. There's a very crowded departures lounge, but I managed to find an empty gate near the Virgin flights. There were a couple of Virgin 747s which were flying to Florida and Las Vegas, and it's very interesting watching the kind of people that go to these American cities. They all have a certain kind of sportswear and, sort of blonde hair, dyed blonde hair, and it's a kind of, I guess it's the people who used to go to Torremolinos, in the 60s, now they go to Florida. Whereas the people on the Berlin flight, there's a certain kind of, they're thinner, they look more intelligent, they look more sensitive and artistic, and they're basically sort of creative class, people in their 30s mostly, artsy, and tourists as well, culture tourists, I guess. So the EasyJet flight was fine, it was a good flight. We had slightly strong winds on landing. My first impressions of Berlin, I was so happy to be back in Berlin after Britain, because Berlin is, as I often say in these things, it's my spiritual homeland in some sense. But it's always, there's an interstitial thing. You always have to find a new location for the Berlin that you remember and recognize, because everything is changing all the time. The locations, everything is moving a little further south into Neukölln, for instance. The kind of Neukölln that I knew in the last decade is now 2 or 3 kilometers down the road, down the Hermannstrasse. So I'm staying on the Hermannstrasse in an Airbnb place. The weather, some things have been imported from Britain to Berlin, which are, of course, slightly negative things. There is the British creative class, which increasingly is congregating here, and that's not a negative thing. That's a sort of paradise for creators and even startup entrepreneurs. But also the weather, to some extent, because of climate change. The jet stream has changed position, so you get these months now in the early summer in Berlin where it's cloudy. It's kind of like British weather. The clouds, you have a sky. I'm in the top floor here, so I'm seeing the sky all the time, and there's all these different colors of clouds and different types of weather coming every few minutes. You might get hail. There was actually a hailstorm the other day. Then you get sunny spells, and then you get rain, and it's windy all the time. So this is a feature of recent Berlin summers, that you get this period of uncertainty, and I kind of feel like I've paid for spring, because in Japan we went through this a couple of months ago, essentially this stormy, uncertain period of weather, and now I feel I've earned a nice sunny, warm spring with lots of blossom, and I'm not getting that. I'm having to pay twice for the same spring, basically, by having come from Japan to Europe. The other thing that's been imported from Britain is the black bubble, what I call the black bubble, which is the surveillance camera, which you now see everywhere in Berlin. You didn't see it at all. It was never on the trains or in the stations, but now they've installed these surveillance cameras, which, of course, it's a black bubble so that you can't see whether it's looking at you or not. And this induces a kind of paranoia. Of course, you feel slightly safer that the authorities are watching you, but at the same time, it's you do get the sense that, wow, okay, so we thought Berlin was this libertarian paradise, but it simply was a few years behind Britain in installing this surveillance apparatus. Also, the Airbnb I'm staying in here is very high tech and a little bit spooky in some ways. Like there's a kind of lock system which you manage with your iPhone, an electronic lock. There's sort of lights which come on every time you cross the communal area. I wanted a whole apartment and tried to book one. People only now, with Airbnb in Berlin. In Germany, they've outlawed whole apartment rentals because this has a deleterious effect on the rental situation. A good legislation, actually. Berlin is, and Germany in general is very good towards renters and doesn't want rents to increase because of things like Airbnb. So I do approve of that. On the other hand, as a consumer of Airbnb, I want there to be the choice of whole apartments, which people are only letting, if they are at all, as whole months, in blocks of a whole month. So I'm in this place that is slightly micromanaging. I got told off for using too much internet and being told exactly what times of the day I was using exactly how many gigabytes, and so I'm not really used to having my. I switched to a different network and that's resolved, but I'm not used to being micromanaged, and there's a certain sense of I don't know. There's a certain sense of paranoia again that induces in you when you feel you're surveyed in that way. But also there are sort of subtle changes. I've just been to Agora, which was my favorite co-working space, set up by some Portuguese people a couple of years ago. The last couple of years I've been going there to hang out. There's a beautiful orchard around an old brick house with a water tower across the road and artist studios and co-working space. Now all those people tapping away on their laptops who were the emigre creative class have been replaced by young parents with little babies dressed up as teddy bears, and lots of people with dogs, enormous numbers of people with dogs in there. So I had to step over dogs, or dogs running around the table, people, well-heeled people in their 30s on their way to the park. Now this is compounded by the fact that this has been the Easter holiday. I genuinely have no idea that Easter is going to happen until it actually happens. So somebody mentioned to me in London, oh, of course, next week is Easter, next weekend is Easter. I'd totally not thought about that at all. I live in Japan, which is a non-Christian society where nothing stops for Christmas. For instance, Christmas is a normal business day. The only day that things stop is New Year's Day. So I came to Berlin on Thursday and then really chomping at the bit, saying I'm going to go to my favorite bookshop tomorrow. I'm going to do all this shopping. And the next day, Friday, everything was absolutely shut and desolate. Luckily, I'm right in a Muslim area here, so there were a lot of cafes, and Muslim shops were basically open, the Turkish shops, thank God. Saturday was kind of a normal business day, but really surchargé, overcrowded with people shopping. Sunday, totally dead, and Monday today, totally dead. So everything closed for 4 days. Can you believe that? And there is this regulation on Friday, particularly, that you're not even allowed to dance, because this is the most somber day in the Christian calendar, the day of Christ's crucifixion. You're not allowed to dance. This is who knows about the separation of church and state in Germany, but one would not think such a Christian thing would apply. And yet today I've been hearing church bells and this sort of enforced holiday schedule where it's tough for single people. I think I'm very much not part of this gemeinschaftlich, this community life of the family and all the rest of it. And it kind of disturbs me and puts me on edge a little bit when these big public holidays like Christmas, Boxing Day, New Year, especially when they all come together and some people close their shops for 10 days or something. My favorite bookshop in the Schillerkiez, Pekod Books, second-hand paperbacks, is closed until tomorrow. Has been closed for the last 4 days. And luckily I had events to distract me from the kind of desolation of the holiday period. So I had the first live Open University talk at O Tannenbaum on Friday evening. No dancing, because there was no music. We were just talking, so we were not breaking any laws there. Not incurring the wrath of the Protestant Inquisition. I don't know how they police this no dancing regulation. And that was actually really good. We had like 35 people and we had a sort of seminar thing at the end, and I saw a lot of old friends. Some of them doing better, some doing worse, and some of them party animals who seemed a little burnt out. Others, old friends who I hadn't seen for a while. And then on Sunday night at the Volksbühne did a proper Momus concert, a seated concert, so the audience weren't dancing, but I was dancing on their behalf up on the stage. And again, I love the Volksbühne. I love that sense of, there are no little black bubbles in the Volksbühne. It's a genuine old Berlin space with opulent lounges and fantastic public areas and a backstage, so I could actually see the scenery backstage and stuff. But I wanted to talk a little bit. I mean, the theme of the Friday Open University thing was socialization and how you're formatted by a place from the moment you arrive there. And in fact, it's the first few moments of your arriving in a new place that are the most revealing, in a sense, the first impressions you get. So my first impression of arriving in Berlin was that the passport inspection, the immigration man was sardonic with me. I'm very sort of fast-paced, so I ran up to his window a little bit too fast, a little bit too soon before I was gestured over. And he said, Warum so langsam? Why so slowly? Sarcastic, because I was too quick. And so I just gave him a sort of smirk, and he waved me through. But there is this sense that there is this sardonic edge to the Berlin welcome, and people can be brash and people can be, but it's not threatening. There's a great vivacity here, especially in down here in Neukölln with the Turkish areas. And my first thing is to go to a big Turkish supermarket and buy the Turkish white cheese, the Turkish yogurt, chickpeas, and to mix that together with Japanese vinegar from the Asiamarkt. So what I love precisely is the vitality of these immigrant areas. And it's a little bit like other hipster situations, like for instance the Lower East Side in New York, where the main streets like Delancey and Houston are kind of proletarian. There's a proletarian energy, often immigrant areas. And then the back streets are desirable, gentrifying. In terms of the Lower East Side, it's already way past gentrification. It's now like the Upper East Side. In many ways, a lot of chic galleries where I used to live. Still the Chinese hanging on in there, because the Chinese are a fairly tenacious and moneyed immigrant community. But so this gentrification battle, which of course is the cliched topic of conversation and came up in the questions at the end of the Open University lecture, I was saying it's essentially up to... Of course, you can be an activist against gentrification, but I think it's essentially up to things like the government agencies which protect the rents. That's very important. So just vote for those parties that believe in protecting things like housing from market forces is my solution to gentrification. But it's a constant challenge to find the areas where the old things that you recognize used to be. I was hanging out the last couple of years with some young people in the Schillerkiez. They've all dispersed really this year, so I'm feeling a little bit bereft. I guess they're all in different cities, and a new bunch of young people has been attending my events. Some people from Potsdam, who are all 19, 20 years old, and so that's kind of interesting. There are new generations coming up. There are also... if I think in terms of my Berlin friends from when I actually lived here, I lived here up until 2010, one of them who's gone to live in Prague, his parents have both died in the last month, really quite disastrous, so he was back in California for various funerals. But the two Japanese friends who actually lived just around the corner from where I am now have just had twins. So in a sense, there's a population replacement, a kind of symmetry to that. There is this, two people died and two people were born. I'm a little bit uneasy with the pram in the hall, this whole idea of the pram in the hall being the enemy of promise. There were literally prams in the hallway of the old house where I used to live on Sanderstrasse, up at Kreuzköln, which is now like 3 kilometers up the road and would now be unaffordable by me. There would now be... I got that place so easily. I was the one of two people, I think, to get this ground floor flat in Neukölln in 2006. Now, in 2017, I would have to make an appointment and be competing with 30 or 40, 50 other people to get a place in that area. I've also been thinking that it's 30 years exactly since I first came to Berlin. I first experienced Berlin in 1987 when I was on tour with Primal Scream. And actually some people were there last night at my concert who had shown me around and been at my very first concerts and all the rest of it. And it was sort of nice to see them again. But yeah, it was 87, and I took a day trip into East Berlin, as it was, and saw the communist era just on the cusp of its disappearance. And it's also coming up for 10 years since I left Berlin. It is pretty much 10 years since I moved to Neukölln, anyway. So I'm seeing, especially in these first days here, I'm here for a month, and I have some work at the end of the month or beginning of next month, Hasterkultur und der Welt, and I'm sort of on the steering committee for their future policy, which is a weirdly official thing for me to do. And after that, I'm off to Italy. But yeah, 30 years, and I was walking across Alexanderplatz, remembering what it was like. It's almost like another lifetime. It really is a different. It was a different state, a different political organization. It's funny now that we have this tension in North Korea, South Korea, because that's the last remaining Cold War situation where you can go to the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, and you can look across and people are staring at you with binoculars as they used to do back in Bowie's time when he was here recording at Hansa. I actually met, one of the things I have to do when I'm here is make a compilation. There's going to be a cherry red compilation of all the creation material with extra tracks. So I've got my archives and my storage here in Berlin. I'm going to go through and digitize some never before heard tracks, which will be the extra tracks on this. I think it's going to be a 2 CD or 2 issue compilation. So luckily I ran into somebody who has a DAT machine and a studio and is going to help me digitize all this material. So that's the other thing I'll be doing here. But yeah, the pram in the hall, and also holidays. These are things which are quite difficult for me to cope with. From tomorrow it'll be a different atmosphere, everything will be fine. It's just that I underestimate and forget to what extent even a bohemian and radical city like Berlin is part of a Christian country with Christian festivals, a Christian calendar, and these major events. I wish I could just avoid them totally. I really ought to go to Bali or somewhere when Easter is happening. I just, it's out of account. But actually, if you look at the demographics of the world and the way the world is going, more and more people are going to be religious, profoundly religious. More of the world's population is going to be religious. So I'm very aware that I'm part of this, as a childless member of the so-called creative class who puts everything onto culture. I'm a part of a dwindling minority, just as when you're in Japan, the Japanese themselves are a dwindling minority of not very religious people who have a negative birth rate. I have obviously a 0 birth rate. I haven't made any children to be religious or not religious. But essentially, there is, that title, Günter Grass, the Germans are dying out. I mean, many types of people are dying out and being replaced by different types of people, and it's quite sobering to think that the world in future will be this super religious place where the sort of secular, rational worldview will be a minoritarian one. And you see it already in Trump, and maybe there'll be future presidents who make Trump look like Einstein. We managed to avoid nuclear war this weekend. Who knows next weekend what will happen? It feels a bit like that. But yeah, I just wanted to give you my view from Berlin, and I hope it's useful. Socialization, I don't think I can ever be fully socialized into Berlin. I'm not sure if I would live in Berlin again, actually, really. Now, when I come back from Japan and find how Christian it is, or find that the places I love are becoming yuppified, and I'm going to have to search for... It's a very delicate thing, what I'm looking for in Berlin is that place where the rent is still sufficiently low that interesting small businesses like Paycord Books can move in, but is not yet popular enough that it's got taken over by people with babies and people with little dogs. So the Schillerkiez, which was the sort of funky student and artist area a couple of years ago, is now really, there's a certain East Village feeling of the little dogs have taken over and the little babies in there with their little wooden tricycles. I used to talk about bonsai toddlers because every neighborhood I used to like had been taken over by these bonsai toddlers. I feel bad saying this because some of my best friends have just had twins, and so they will be joining this wooden tricycle set. And who knows, we'll have to see how that affects their productivity. One of them's an artist, the other's a jewelry maker. I think probably they're in a kind of hell just now of stereo screaming. But maybe not. Maybe they have little kids who are good as gold. And really, it's terribly a kind of sterile privilege that I'm really speaking from the pinnacle of an endangered, sterile, white, liberal, creative person who has the choice to live anywhere in the world. And I mean, I do choose to come back to Berlin, and I will enjoy seeing all the art here and helping out at HKW and finding where those new spots are. I think probably, since I'm much further down the Hermannstrasse than I usually would be, I'm usually up at the Korpuser Dam, and now I'm 2 or 3 kilometers further down that same road, which becomes the Hermannstrasse. So I'm at S-Bahn, the S-Bahn station, Hermannstrasse. There is really nothing south of here. As far as I'm aware, there is no gentrification going on to the south of here. There may be, in fact. So I'm here. At least I have a month to do my own stuff, and but also to interact with the city and be a little bit formatted, like an old-fashioned floppy disk that's formatted by the operating system of Berlin. So let's see how it goes, and I'll no doubt be giving you reports.
Open University.